A new exhibition at the Guggenheim Museum in New York City is showing off contemporary art from the Middle East and North Africa. But a storm is blowing from paradise takes on colonization, globalization, the intertwined histories of the countries within the region and their relationship with Europe.
Truth is in the eye of the beholder. In the eyes of Iranian artist Rokni Hairizadeh, it resembles a combination of George Orwell's Animal Farm and the nightly news. Images from YouTube or newsreels are manipulated to highlight the media's ability to control narratives, especially when they relate to events in the Middle East. Hairizadeh's art is part of the Guggenheim exhibition But a Storm is Blowing from Paradise that runs until October 5th. It features installations, photographs, sculptures, and videos. Tunisian artist Nadia Kabylinki takes a unique look at migrants from the Middle East and North Africa with her Flying Carpets installation.
It documents 1 week of me living with the street peddlers on a bridge. A bridge also because, like flying carpets, it's a symbolic element. It links two spaces, it has this hovering effect, and it is over water. So this liquid, also the idea of traveling, and most of these immigrants came through water, through the sea. And they understand that it's a kind of a tribute to their presence, but at the same time it's all about invisibility. So there are no names, it's all anonymous, they stay invisible, but it's the trace of exactly where they have put their carpets that will stay.
Israeli Ori Gersht reminds us that it wasn't long ago that Europeans were fleeing their homelands. His video, Evaders, retraces German Jewish philosopher Walter Benjamin's efforts to flee the Nazis. His journey stalled out in Spain in June of 1940, where he committed suicide to avoid being returned to Nazi-occupied France. American artist Mariam Ghani contrasts modernism in Germany and Afghanistan with her twin-screen installation, A Brief History of Collapses.
Brief History of Collapses in some ways could be thought of as looking at history from the perspective of two buildings. And the two buildings are the Darlaman Palace in Kabul, which was built in the 1920s by the German architect Walter Harten, who was commissioned by King Amanullah. And the second building is the Museum Fridericianum in Kassel, which was built by Simon Louis Dury in the 1770s, and he was commissioned by Friedrich, who was the Landgraf of Hesse at the time. What's interesting about the two buildings is that even though they're built, almost 200 years apart, basically they both kind of represent a similar moment in the two societies that they are a part of, which is this kind of impulse on the part of these rulers to open the societies.
After its run at the Guggenheim, But a Storm is Blowing from Paradise will move to the Pera Museum in Istanbul at the beginning of 2017.
But a Storm is Blowing in from Paradise features a broad selection of artists and works from many disciplines, including installations, photography, sculptures, and video. To give us more insight, we're joined by the exhibition's curator herself, Sarah Raza. Sarah Raza, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Tell us about the intriguing, almost poetic title of this exhibition, But a Storm is Blowing in from Paradise.
Hello and thank you for having me on the show. The exhibition But a Storm is Blowing from Paradise is the third phase of the Guggenheim UBS Global Art Initiative, and it was intended to diversify the US collection, the main collection of the US Museum, and its holdings here in New York, and particularly to change some of the Eurocentric dynamics of the show. So my exhibition is twofold. Firstly, it's a series of acquisitions, and then secondly, it's to curate those acquisitions. So the title, But a Storm is Blowing from Paradise, actually comes from a body of work in the exhibition by Iranian artist Rokni Herazadeh, a series of paintings that are painted directly on top of news media or internet search printed papers. And it is also borrowed from a sentence from a notable essay by a German philosopher, Walter Benjamin, who was escaping Nazi persecution during the Second World War and trying to undertake a very treacherous journey between France and Spain with the intention of moving on to neutral Portugal, where he would make it onto the United States. Unfortunately, he was denied access, and he subsequently took his own life. So there are a lot of references to history, in particular our current history in terms of migration, all rooted within the title. But also it's not intended to be a kind of prosaic analysis. You rightly say that it's quite poetic, and that's also followed through in the curatorial selection.
Right. Sarah Raza, the exhibition features some newly acquired permanent pieces for the Guggenheim Museum. What are some of those pieces and why are they significant?
Well, what you see on view at the Guggenheim are 18 artworks by 17 artists out of a pool of 27 artworks that were collected on the occasion of the MAP project and by 20 artists. And they're featured within the Tower galleries. And all these works have entered the permanent collection, and they're from the region how we identify with as Middle East and North Africa, which itself is a construct. So it's quite interesting to play with that. The works are organized like akin to a complex jigsaw puzzle within 2 floors, 4 and 5, and you could enter at either floor and gain an interesting experience because several of the works have this overlap of ideologies and thematics. So there's this idea of a cross-circulation of meaning and knowledge employed within the exhibition. And there are several anchor works. One of the interesting themes is geometries relating to thinking sciences, a branch of the mathematics, and ideas around logic that are carried through in the design of the exhibition. Also, there is strong reference to the ideologies of architecture, both in the making of the modern Middle East, but also the way in which they were used during the colonial enterprise of the region as well. To somewhat exploited ideas are also explored, how architecture has been exploited in particular. And what we see are anchor works. So on Towers 4, you enter, you see the work of Kader Attia. He has created a Couscous city, a reincarnation of the ancient city of Gadir in Algeria, entirely in Couscous. So it's an anchor work that critiques kind of intrusion of foreign architects such as Le Corbusier and his successor Fernand Poulin, their work in Algeria when it was under the French occupation. Upstairs on Tower 5, we see Nadia Kabilinki's Flying Carpets, which is a poetic ode to the plight of immigrants that arrive at the shores of cities such as Venice, where the work was conceived. They sell their wares on these carpet-like mats. We have produced a suspended installation that hangs above from the ceiling of the space that kind of alludes to an open-air prison rather than an exotic mode of flying carpet, kind of mimics the everyday reality of immigrants or migrants in cities such as Venice.
Well, following its presentation in New York, the exhibition will travel to Pera Museum in Istanbul in 2017. Why Istanbul?
Well, I'm delighted that the exhibition will travel in 2017 to the Pera Museum in Istanbul. Istanbul is such an important city located at the crossroads between Europe and Asia. But more specifically, I was very much interested in unraveling ideas around origins within this exhibition. It is very important for me to reflect upon the Ottomans' role, for example, in the region. 400 years of Ottoman rule was exercised over the Arab states, predominantly known as West Asia. With the exception of Iran and Turkey, much of the region had undergone, after the Ottoman Empire collapsed, kind of European, British colonial treatment. So it's interesting for me to kind of unravel that and bring it back to the idea of origins. So Turkey, in particular Istanbul, is an ideal location to explore many of these historical themes as well. And play with them how they are performed within the current context, future context, present context, if you like.
Sarah Raza from the Guggenheim Museum in New York, thank you very much for joining us.